Hello everyone and welcome. So I'll show you how to integrate Redux into a React application using the Redux library, the React Redux library to connect React and Redux. I'll show you how to add Redux Thunk into the whole equation, which allows you to do asynchronous actions with Redux. I'll show you how to add the Redux Devtools in order to have like a nice UI where you can interact with the store, check what's happening, which action are being triggered, and what is being changed. And I'll also do like a very simple sort of demonstration of using all of those things using the json-placeholder API and displaying some data from there. Also, I'll be using Material UI React to just spice up things and make them look nice without using any CSS. So starting off, I have this base project here. You'll have it already in the description if you want to start from the same. First of all, obviously, we need to install a few packages, which will be Redux, React Redux, Redux Thunk, and finally, I just need to copy the name, please. Where is the name here? Here it is. Redux Devtools Extension. Yeah, those are the packages we'll be using. So, if you don't already know what Redux is, it's a library that allows you to centralize all the data in your application. So you have one main store, which holds all the data in your application instead of having each component have its own state. This makes it easier to pass data around the app instead of drilling props. You just have props that you can pass to any component using the connect function, which is demonstrated. Actually, maybe it's better demonstrated here. Yeah, using the connect function. So you could easily pass any data to any. So you could just give any data that any part of the app needs to just that part of the app without drilling it through other components. The setup for it is a bit tedious, but I'll show you it just once. I'll explain it, but you don't really need to do it over and over again. You can most of the time just copy it. So the first thing you need to do is go into your topmost component, which will obviously most likely be index.js, and you need to import two things. First of all, you need to import the provider from React Redux. This will allow you, this provider will obviously provide all the components under it, so your entire application, with access to the store, so to the data in the store, as well as to the functions or actions as they're called registered in the store. And then to the provider, you need to pass one prop, which is the store. Now the store is something you define and create yourself. I'll import it here and then I'll create it afterwards. So we'll import the store from /store. Okay, so that's like the first thing you gotta do. The next thing is actually creating this store. So we'll create in the source next to our index.js, so store.js. So the store is basically application level state, as in it holds all the data for the entire application. That's what the main use for it is. In order to create the actual store basically object, it's basically an immutable object. So in order to create it, we need to import two things. Well, we will import two things. First one is the create store function. We'll import that from Redux itself. So Redux. You can also use Redux with other frameworks, not just React. Just it's common to use it with React because they go well together. So we import the create store method, as well as I'll import the apply middleware method, which is the method that will allow us to apply the Thunk middleware to our store, which allows the asynchronous actions to be dispatched. The next thing we want to import is the from Redux Devtools Extension. What we want to import is the compose with DevTools. What this allows us to do is just wrap the apply middleware function with this, which then just enables this thing right here on our website, which allows us to interact with the store in this really nice way with the UI instead of going through the console. It just makes it a lot easier to interact with the store and see what's happening. The last thing we want to import here is the Redux Thunk, and we just want to import Thunk since it's a default export. Okay, so let's now create the store. So the way you do it is just you create a const named store, and then you call the function create store. This function then takes in multiple parameters. The one we'll do right now is the compose with DevTools. Inside of that, we will then enhance the store. That's what the apply middleware is. It's a store enhancer, which then takes in the middleware we want to apply to the store, which in our case is just Thunk. Now, another thing we need to pass to the store, it needs in order to function, is the route reducer. Now, the route reducer is something we will define. It's the main reducer that holds all the it's a main reducer that combines all the other reducers into one big reducer, which is just one giant object that has the other reducers as like parts of it, as objects inside of objects, basically. So let's fix this up, and then also here import the route reducer from ./route_reducer. Now we'll define it right now. So the next thing you want to do is define the route reducer.js. Now the route reducer will be actually the simplest part of the app. It's just going to be a simple import from Redux. I don't like the double quotes. So from Redux, and we want to import is the CombineReducers function, which, as the name suggests, combines reducers. So const route reducer is going to equal combine reducers, and then inside of it we pass an object which will hold all the reducers. In this case, I'll be using the JSON placeholder thing, and we'll be using the users route to just fetch all the users. So I'll just define a users reducer, and that's the only one we'll have. And then down here below it, I'll export the route reducer as a default export. And at the top, obviously, we need to import the users from ./reducers/users. Obviously here you can have multiple reducers, and that's what usually you do have in bigger applications. It's just this way they're very segmented. Export default route reducer and fix this indent, and we are good. The route reducer is done. Next thing is actually creating the reducer. So reducers, and then inside the reducers folder we want to create a users.js reducer. Now what a reducer is a function that gets two parameters: the state, or as in the initial state the reducer should have, and then the action. So starting off, obviously we want to define the initial state. So const initial state, and then inside the initial state we will have a list of users. So list of users, which will be an empty array. And then below that we want to define this function. So export function users, which will be our reducer. It will have the state, the default state of it, which will be the initial state, and then we will also pass any action that is called to this reducer. Now a reducer is comprised of a switch statement, which checks the action type, which is something you define in a separate folder, and each action has a separate type. Basically, the action type is a string which describes the action. In our case, for a list of users, we'll have an action. The one I'll define is user set. This action will just set the list of users to a list of users, or to an array of users, instead of just it being an empty array. So now inside of our switch statement, we'll have a case which will pertain to which will be called users set, which will set the list of users. And then inside of that case we want to return. So whatever we return here, it will be the new state, the new condition in which our the new value of our reducer. So at the very beginning, when we initialize the app, our app will have the route reducer, and then inside of it there will be this reducer, the users reducer, and then inside of that we will have the list of users. Whatever we return here will affect what the users reducer contains. So usually if you have multiple values here besides just the one, what you want to do is destructure the state, so the state stays unchanged, and then you want to just change one thing in that state. In our case, this is going to be the list of users, and we'll set that to action.payload. Now the payload is something you pass to every action in order to, pass the data and pass the values that you want to change. Now the other case you want to have here obviously is the default case, and then the default case will just return the state itself, which is unchanged. This is not supposed to close here. This is supposed to close below, but let's fix this up. There you go. Okay, so this is just basically going to be our reducer. So the one thing we're missing here is the action type, which is this one right here. So we'll just import that from a file we'll create now. We'll import the users set type from //types, which will be a file we'll create just now. So we want to go back, we want to go here and create a new file named types.js. So a type, action type is just a constant. So we export all of them. So export const, and then user set will be the const name, and then the value will be the same, just in a string form. That's what a type is. It's just a variable with the name and then a string as its actual value. The reason we use this is to connect reducer switch case to an action. So now let's move on to actions. So first, actually, I'll create a folder named actions. I'm giving you a little bit more structure here. Obviously, in a bigger app, you'll structure differently. And even in this app, you could not have folders. You could just have it as one file because you'll have like one action. But so we'll have the users.js action file. I usually name them the same, so I can be like, okay, this is the users.js actions. These are the user.js reducers, and they're connected because you know, the actions in the reducer, the actions that pertain to a reducer only pertain to that one reducer. So the first thing we want to do obviously is import that one type that we created, which is user set. So from /types, you want to import the users set type. And this is where we define actions. So there's two types of actions. A pure action, which is an action that just changes the store, and then there is a thunk action, which is asynchronous, and it can have logic inside it, and it can then dispatch other actions. So a pure simple action will be const users set, for example. Now this action will take in a parameter, which will be the users that we want to set in our store, and then it will return. You could write this differently, just this is, in my opinion, the cleanest way to write it because this is an implicit return. It will return an object with the type of our action, which will be the user set, and then the payload, which will be the data we want to set the user's value to, which in our case will be the users, right? So this function this action is pure because it only does one thing. It just takes the users, and then based on the and then it just dispatches an action with the users set as the type, and then the payload, the users that we passed to it. An unpure action or a asynchronous action, which I will export because I will actually use it in a component because it will actually have more logic, is an action that has more to it than just dispatching to the store. So we'll define this as fetch users. Now this action will not take any parameters in it. You could pass parameters to it when you call it in your components, but I will not do this in this case. And then it will take one parameter, the dispatch parameter, because in order to dispatch other actions from one action, you need the dispatch, and then this is where the function actually starts. So here we'll be using Axios to create this request. So import Axios from Axios, right? And we can also make this an asynchronous function. So async right there. Okay. So let's say const response equals await axios.get, and then we'll copy this URL like that, and then yeah, so this will give us the this JSON response, and then what we want from that is just the data. So we'll say const users equals response data, and then what we want to do with these users now is dispatch the other action, the pure users set action, and then pass the users to it. And this dispatch right here, this will actually modify the store and add our users to the store, right? So this is basically it when it comes to changing. We have all three things done. So we have the store, which holds all the data. We have the reducers, which based on the case, which give it initial data, but also based on the case, modify the store and change it. And then we have the actions, which trigger these changes in the store with the data we pass in. So we never directly do anything with the store. We indirectly trigger actions that then go to reducers then modify the store. Hopefully all that makes sense. Now we move on to actually connecting all of this to a component. So I have a very simple homepage component right here, which is fetch people people button. What I'll do is show you how to connect it to the store and then how to trigger an action when we click on the fetch people button, and then maybe I'll show you how to display the data as well, but you should know how to do that already since you're using React. Okay, so the first thing we need obviously is the connect function. You can read more about it here if you like. I'll just copy it from here. So we need the connect function. And then we need, I'll copy this bit and then I'll do this a little bit differently. So the connect function connects a component that you export with it to the actual store that we defined, and allows you to map dispatch to props and map state to props. Now const map state to props, and then what am I doing here? Oh yeah, so this takes in the state and returns whatever you want to map to. So homepage down here. Okay, so the connect function takes in multiple parameters, but the main two are map state to props and map dispatch to props. Map state to props allows you to map the Redux state data to the props of this component. So in our case, inside of our RouteReducer, which is the state, so I have too many things open. Let's close a few of these things because I'm not working on them anymore. Close this as well and this. Okay. So inside of our store, we have the RouteReducer. The RouteReducer is what we call state. So let's say we want to get our users from the store. So we have users. We want to define users. I want to pass them to our to this component as props. So to get them, we need to go to the state, which is going to be the store. Then inside of the RouteReducer, we have the users. So we say .users. So inside of users, and then inside of the users, we have a list of users. This is where our users are going to be. So now, in this component, if we console.log the props, inside the props, there's going to be a variable, a value of users, which will be this value from the store. What map state to props allows you to do is map values from the Redux store to a specific component. So pass values from the Redux store to a specific component as props, even like not by drilling stuff, but by using connect. Map dispatch to props allows you to map actions and give them as props to your components using Redux, so without passing them directly. We'll do that here with the fetch users action. So I'll do a actions sort of section here. I'll say import fetch users from, and then we say .. and then we go to actions, and then we say users. And then in order to be able to use this fetch users action inside of the home page component, we'll have to pass it right here to map dispatch to props. I'll do the same sort of structure for it so it's sort of consistent. Yeah, okay. So now we have this homepage component which is connected to our Redux store using the connect function. We mapped to its props. We're passing the users from the store and the fetch users action from our actions. So now if I start our application, this will console log the props. Inside the props, we should see two things: the fetch users function, or like the fetch users action, and the users from the store. We also have an issue. Can't resolve root reducer in store. Oh, I misspelled it. Reducer. Compile with warnings. As usual, was not found in users. Reducer users. No, I might import in root reducers. I'm meant to import like this because it's a specific export. Okay. So now we have our app here. We have the fetch thing. And then if we go to the console, we have an object, which is going to be our props, which has the users, and the fetch users action, which is a function, but you get it's that. And also if we go up here, this is now green or enabled, whatever. Redux Devtools has access to this site. So if you click on it, you can go to state, and then you can see our state, which consists of the users and then list of users. You can see no actions are being triggered and nothing else has happened still in the application, but we have like this nice interface where we can see what's happening. So the next thing we want to do is actually trigger this fetch users function whenever a user clicks on this fetch people button. So what we want to do is on click, we want to trigger the, well, we can actually destructure up here. So we want to define from props, we want to take the users, and also we want to take the fetch users from props, and then we'll use the fetch users function to be triggered whenever someone clicks on this fetch people button. So if we refresh the page, we have this thing, and if we go to our Redux store or state, we can see that the state is currently empty, list of users empty. If we click on this, oh, look at that. So an action was triggered, the user set action, the type is user set, and then the payload was this, because if you go to the network tab, it sent a request to json-placeholder. So it triggered that action, it fetched the data, and then it set it, and now in our state, in our store, we have all this data. And all this data is also available in our component. We're not using it for anything, but it is available. As you can see, this is our current Redux store. This is our current Redux store state. This is what it's there. So there's a list of users and there's an actual list of users. So what can we do here? We can use this users array that we have now and map through it and take each user and let's say we could return, right? We could return a some sort of JSX to display the user's data. So I'll use a card. So let's look for a card component in Material UI. Okay, so this one seems sort of reasonable. Card and then card content, and then I'll ignore the other stuff. I'll delete this one in the middle. So we'll have a card. So let's copy this bit and then I'll remove most of it. So this bit can be removed and then most of this can be removed, and then the class and then the class. Okay. Typography, card outline, what's the issue? Oh, this needs to be, well, I could remove the return and then it's gonna work because this is an implicit return. Okay. So we also, what's the issue? Oh yeah, okay, so when you're mapping through an array, you need to provide a key to the topmost element. In our case, it's gonna be item.id, because I do believe these all have an ID. Yes, they do, and it's gonna be unique, which is good. Also, I need to import typography from typography, like that. Does that work? Yes, it sort of says word of the day though, which is, oh yeah, because, okay. So what we want to do here is make a few fields. Name, which is going to equal to item.name, and then we'll do two more. We'll do two more values, right? So we'll do what else is there here? Name. There's email, and then there's the phone. we'll use the phone as well. So maybe we're calling them whatever. Okay. So currently, the way this is gonna work is we're gonna refresh this. So it's clean, it's empty. Okay. So currently our store is empty, and this is gone. When we click this button, on click, this will trigger this fetch users action. It will fetch the data from here, and then trigger dispatch this other action. This action will dispatch an action. This function will dispatch an action of this type, and with the users we passed in, that will go to this reducer. It will find this action type, which will be the user set one, and then it will change the state of this reducer, which is inside of the root reducer, to list of users, who would then be to whatever we passed to it. This will change the store, basically. That's the workflow. So we click this, this gets added, and then we have all these cards here with different values for name, email, and phone. This doesn't really look too nice, but it works, and it's good. It works, right? It shows that all of this does work together. Now, you could do a lot here. You could add an X in the corner. You could then add a new action in here, which will send a request to whatever the API's delete route is, and take the ID of the card you clicked on. Like in the, you can find the ID of the user for all of the cards you clicked on, and then remove it from the database, and then it could come back and say, oh, it's removed, and then you could refresh the store with another fetch request, and then you can remove it. You could create CRUD application. This is how you do it. But that's basically it when it comes to Redux, React Redux, setting up DevTools, setting up reducers, doing the whole setup. You don't need to worry too much about the store, the root reducer setup and stuff like that. You can that code's always going to be the same. You're just going to copy it, and also the same goes for the provider. The reducers, you'll just get used to defining them like this, and then you'll just copy, you'll copy this to make a new one. You just change the name and the initial state, and then you'll add a billion other cases that you need. As for actions, there's really just two very simple types of actions: the pure actions that just change and interact with the reducer, and then the actions that use Thunk, which dispatch other actions but hold logic and stuff like that. That's really it. Thank you for watching, and hope you understand Redux, ReduxThunk, and the whole React Redux workflow now. A bit better at least. Bye-bye. Okay, this is just like a quick bonus thing at the end. I never address these sort of underlines, which sort of say that the props are missing validation. There's something called prop types that is used commonly with React. So import prop types from prop types. Basically, what it allows you to do is specify what type a prop is, as in, is it a number, is it a array, is it a function, whatever. So in order to do that, I'll just show you how to do that real quick with our example. So you import it as I showed you, then you go to homepage, you type in prop types, lowercase here actually, and you open a object. It's just an object. So in it, you take the props. In our case, it's users, and then we say what type of a prop is users. So we say prop types, and then what type is it? It's an array, right? And then is it required? Should it always be there? And we say yes. And then we have another prop, which is gonna be the fetch users, which is gonna be of type function or func. In our case, the reason prop types are used is because they give you warnings in the console, and that the props you passed are of a different type than the ones you specified here. So if for some reason somewhere in the app someone passes or sets the users to not an array but a string or something else, and we here define that it has to be an array, it always has to be an array, the app will then be like, yo, this is not an array, what are you doing? And then we'll have an error, and we'll be like, oh, something in the code is changing it, we should check what's up and what's happening. And that's why they're useful. Also, Redux is a bit sort of a big thing to get your head wrapped around. So if you don't get the whole thing, if it all doesn't click right away, that's normal. Just if you can just get the stuff down and then just work with it for a little bit, maybe like a month or like a week or two, a month. Eventually, at some point, it's just gonna click, and then it's all gonna make sense, and you're gonna think it's the best thing in the world. Until that happens, it's gonna be a bit painful, but stick through it. Watch this video multiple times. Watch other videos on Redux multiple times. Eventually, don't just watch videos. Actually work with Redux. So I showed you an example on how to implement it and work with it. Implement your own stuff on top of like this example and just keep adding stuff. If you just work with it for a little while, it will click in your mind, and then you'll just understand it. It's just sort of like learning like how to ride a bike. Eventually it just clicks, and then you're like, okay, this is amazing. I love this. It makes sense. You don't like it just clicks at some point. So yeah, bye bye.